it's Coach Tori, and this is Raising Runners. We will be talking about running, mental health, youth sport burnout, specialization in sports, motivation, encouragement, coaching, parenting, sleep, nutrition, really anything that you can think of that we as parents or coaches or just runners can do to help our young athletes. Today, I get to talk with Shari Miller. She's a doctor of physical therapy and orthopedic clinical specialist. We talk about running. We talk about her specific journey in running. We also talk about how she helps people either get into running or just a lot of physical therapy things in that realm. She and I get to have a great discussion about body types, body composition. She gives us lots of sciencey knowledge, but she does break it down so that us lay people here can understand. It was so great to learn more about how the body works and muscles and all of those things. So that was a really fun talk there. And she shares a little bit of info on how she helps gets her kids ready for sports, transitioning especially from the summer into fall, which is really relevant because that is what we are doing currently. So hopefully you find something helpful. Again, I think I may have also said this, so not fancy, super chill, just conversation. I literally will just edit out the teeny tiny bit of me just saying that part just now. And then I'll do an intro, outro, boom. So
okay.
Nothing crazy. So I guess if you just want to start by, you had mentioned you were a cheerleader in the past, and I'm sure you maybe had some other things going on as you grew up sports wise, but if you just want to talk about how you got into sports and cheerleading, how coaches, anybody influential, things like that, kind of just give us a little intro to your past, I guess, and then kind of bring us to now.
Okay, sure. Okay, so I am Shari for those listening, and in the past, so I played some sports when I was super young, but most of it was just with the neighborhood kids, and that's really what kept my athletic ability there. So once I got older to junior high levels, I was able to just show up at tryouts and actually make a team. Where I think today's culture, that's a little bit different, but at least then I was able to. And the fact that I didn't like running when I was really young, didn't play into holding me back as much until I was older. Junior high, I decided, just because a friend asked, to try out for cheerleading with her because she didn't want to show up alone. It was sure, it'd be fun. I'll do it. Well, I made the team, but our coach was very adamant that we had at least be able to run a mile at the start of every single practice. And running a mile for me was really challenging because it was I can do jumps, I can do all the anaerobic stuff, but even a mile was really taxing. I got side cramps. I didn't know how to breathe. I just wasn't good at it. And it was okay, I'm the last person finishing every time, and the coach is cheering me along. And she really encouraged me that it didn't matter, one, how fast you were, that you could still do it. And two, started to teach me a little bit of the breathing. One of the girls I cheered with, though, honestly taught me how to run, which sounds so crazy because we all grow up running, right? But she took me one day, and I thought I had to run without ever stopping. And she kind of introduced, at the time I didn't know it, but training, and just pick a tree, we're going to this tree, pick this next spot, we're going to go to this next spot, and then you can stop or catch your breath, breathe. Stuff that I thought before that meant I was failing at running if I did those things. But she taught me how to actually basically measure my breathing with what I was doing. And that friend really was influential on keeping me in the mindset that I could do it. Because so often we want to count ourselves out. So cheerleading wise, it was just that little bit of running that kind of showed me, hey, I can actually do this. And do something that's a little bit harder and more challenging. I did come to find out in that process, though, that I had sports-induced asthma. which made things add up as to why when I was younger, all of a sudden when it was like full field soccer, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And my parents just let me stop, and they just figured I didn't like it. And there was an actual reason behind why I probably did not like it and why it was so hard for me. Excuse me. So really the cheerleading coach is kind of the one that pushed me, because like no one had ever pushed me out of my comfort zone before. And even though it was just a mile, it was enough just to nudge me to like force myself to mentally overcome that. And that really helped me grow and understand and see like I could do a lot more than I thought I could. And then basically through adult life, I ran just in college for like maintenance of miles, that sort of thing. But once I became, so I'm a physical therapist by trade. I worked with the US Army for several years, and everyone has to be able to run, like it's part of the job. So I got really good at how do I help runners who aren't necessarily good at what they're doing, but it's part of their job, be able to improve. So I saw through that, then as myself as an adult, I was like, oh, there's this actual like process I can take myself through. And I worked with my niece the same way on figuring out the breathing, figuring out like the rhythm, getting through the mindset stuff that like holds us back so much. And understanding that like these things can actually be taught. It doesn't have to be like you're just naturally born with it, where I had always thought before like you had to be, and you don't. So helping kids to see that and to understand that like, yeah, some people are naturally good at different things, but at the same time, you can train your body to do these same things as well. It doesn't have to be like a naturally born with skill. And that was something I didn't recognize until I was older and got into like this science side of things, that it really opened up my eyes on kind of the possibilities.
Yeah, but that is such a great evolution too. And it sounds like your cheerleading team was intense, like a mile before every practice. Kind of sounds like a lot. Like I know that a mile, depending on what sport you do, like is not that far, but that kind of seems, was that normal? Were you on like a pretty competitive team?
Um, it wasn't so much that. I think honestly, a lot of it was she was intent on not only to ourselves proving to us, but also proving to the other sports teams around us that you're an athlete too, and that you train and condition the same as these other athletes. She was also a fitness instructor for like group fitness programs. So I think that was a little bit of her driving force, and also the encouragement of like, you can do this and you can push past what you think you can. But yeah, I was not something when I tried out that I thought I was signing up for.
Yeah, I was gonna
But
say, I mean, we didn't have a super serious cheerleading team at my high school growing up, but like I don't think we ever saw them running. But I love that whole idea of like, yeah, you guys are a team, you guys are a sport, you guys are working really, really hard. So let everyone see that on a way that we can all relate. Like, oh, yep, the cheerleading people, they're running, right? We all run. So that is so awesome.
yeah.
So you talked about like helping people who have to do running as a job, or even like, you know, it can kind of relate to anybody, like people who don't identify as runners, but who need to be running or who want to start running. And it sounds like you kind of started your, I guess, like embracing of being a runner with that one girl on your team that taught you about like fartlek running and those kinds of things. Do you have kind of a general way that you have people start, or do you get to know them and make it really individualized? Like, is there kind of a method to that?
So some of it is individualized, and it tailors based on one, somewhat the age level. So honestly, I'm a mom of 3 boys. So I tailor what I do also to my kids as well. And then also I've helped some of their friends, like their moms have reached out the same way because they know my science background and therapy background. And they basically are asking, how do I help them get faster? Like, what do I do? So it all depends on like what they're looking for. So some are looking for, even at like a lot of the elementary schools have like the walkathon or the sports day or field day, like at the very end of the year. And that's where a lot of this mindset stuff comes in for a lot of kids. So a couple of the parents reached out and was like, hey, my son was the very last one to finish. Like, our school meets up with another school, so it's two whole schools, and I think it's the grade levels basically run at the same time, and it was like he was the very last one to finish. And just that mindset kind of like, oh, like, it's crushing. And even for a parent, if you're watching, you're just like, oh, come on, buddy, like, you got this, and you want them to get there. So it depends, like, if they're looking for speed, and improving like that, because it's more of like, hey, once in a while they need it, or maybe they play baseball and they just need that short sprint, kind of speed, or even just for our sprinters for running groups. For speed stuff, I honestly encourage it to let it be more game focused, because with the youth, it's not as much pressure if it's a game. Where if they feel like it's a skill and they're up against someone else, then they're more critical of themselves. So with youth population, and honestly, even some of my adults, as long as they're in that healthy range and not coming back from injury, a lot of it can be just getting some rolling hills into it. And it's like, hey, we run up every hill, but we get to walk down every hill. Or like, I live in a really flat area in Ohio. I grew up in Cincinnati though, which is a lot of like up and down big hills. So it depends on where you are, but even if it's just, hey, there's one hill in the town and that's all it is, it's just go make it a game of it, of run up the hill and maybe roll down the hill if it's, a younger kid that just wants to do the fun stuff. So the process depends on if it's kind of speed versus distance. Speed, it's make it a game. Honestly, like 3 to 5 minutes of good, like hard effort can do wonders for a kid. And it's like, that's all maybe needs to be in one session, and then they do the rest of their other session. Because science shows if we're putting like that hard, intense effort in, a lot of times you only need to train that for a really short time window. You just have to consistently do that. But then if we're working on distance, honestly, it's just getting them out there more often, and that consistency, building them up and letting them know, like, it's okay to stop and take rest breaks. It's okay to catch your breath. It's okay, like, if you can't run the whole way, but next time try to run a little bit further than you did that first time, just so the mindset game doesn't get in there. Because like, as adults, we've overcome that. And as adult runners, like, we figure that out, and we know that, hey, the first 2 miles, like, my brain is telling me to stop. What am I doing? And we know how to overcome that. We learn that like through time as we run, as grown-ups. But the younger kids, they don't have those coping and mental strategies yet. So really helping build that in, as well as just a ton of encouragement and a ton of reminding everyone that we're on our own journey. And like, all you have to do is, hey, like, maybe we do a run today, but we'll test it a month from now and see if there's any change. And being able to test and retest is so key and critical, because it gives them that accomplishment. And I mean, that's what they need, is like that feedback. They can't measure really a whole month of change themselves, because time is very elusive and different for kids. But seeing that progress from like point A to point B, or realizing, oh, I remember that was so hard and today it felt easy. Those are the things that build up the kids as runners to be able to last through their whole running journey. And that's whether you're working with elementary age, junior high. So much of it is like shaping what these cultural mindset norms are, and then what we tell ourselves. So if you're giving that feedback to them that, you can do this, and not every single person is exactly the same, and this is your journey, and maybe that other person's ran for several years and this is your first time trying, like, it's going to be very different. So yeah, really my process is kind of science backed, but also making it fun and adapting it for that age group.
I love that you're talking so much about mindset too, because I think at least for me, in like more recent years, I think we're all kind of realizing like it's not just being naturally good at something. It's also not just working really, really hard. I mean, of course, as you're working hard and you're persisting and you're gaining that resilience, like you are getting a lot of that mindset stuff too. But like that is a huge part of kind of everything, but like especially in sports. So I love that you're pointing that out. But you do keep mentioning science and you're a doctor of physical therapy. So I don't think you mentioned exactly like what inspired you to want to do that. Did you always know that was like your career path? Was it something that happened, or you're just really into the science? Like what made you want to do that?
Um, so a few things kind of led me to physical therapy. One, excuse me, was I became interested in like exercise and like weightlifting. I'm like, well, why do some people have like really defined muscles and other people like don't? And what are they doing to get those defined muscles? That was kind of like my junior high school mindset of like, hey, like I saw that girl, she had like some really defined biceps. Like, what is she doing? So that just like piqued my curiosity to kind of set things even further, and looking into understanding what exercises work what muscles and like how you build muscle. So that curiosity came about that way. The second biggest influence, probably of a lot of what I do, is my mom had a traumatic ankle injury when she was in her 30s, and basically had to have like completely reconstructed like pins, plates, like everything type of surgery. She was on a walker, and like seeing your mom like in her 30s using a walker to like learn how to walk again is like a really impactful thing. So seeing her go from somebody that was active and having that injury and then having to get back just to be able to walk and do like all of her normal stuff, was just like a really influential thing of, okay, how do you take someone from they can't even like stand up next to the bed all the way to now they're getting back and they're being super active. So my high performance sports orthopedic side kind of comes from the first realm. And then like my rehab injury recovery comes from the second. And then also to know that sometimes with physical therapy, the way healthcare is set up is we don't always take people to that finish line. And we cut them off and say, well, you're doing good enough. You can walk and you can do stairs. But we don't get people back into that performance side. And I think for one, people's health and also for their kind of longevity and what they love and they're passionate about, I really make it a point in what I do to get people to that performance side, because that extra gap that's often left, like that's what fulfills us. And I think giving that back to people is so key. But then also kind of on the youth side and with my own kids, it's teaching them to discover like those passions, and then the understanding of how sports and just being active and running can show yourself like how you can do hard things, even though sometimes our brain wants to tell us we can't, or people want to tell us we can't, or someone wants to say, like the older brother wants to tell the younger brother, like, you can't run as fast as me, you're not good. And it's like, well, no, you have to understand how to find your own strength. And I think for me, I found a lot of that strength through sports. And then as a mom is when I really, really got into running a lot more. And that's when I kind of discovered kind of strength through running. And that's where the mindset piece came in for me, because to me, running is hard. So it wasn't a naturally easy thing. And I just want to show everyone that you can do it, even if it feels hard.
So I definitely want to get into obviously being a mom of kids who play sports, because I do want to talk about that stuff because that's super relevant. But I want to go back to the first thing you were saying, because that's kind of how I found you. Was I was looking for someone who could talk about like body composition and body image. And, we want to see more diverse bodies everywhere, right? But in sport, it all came to me when I was watching the World Championships for track and fields last week. And I mean, you watch the marathon, everybody has the same body. I mean, everybody, right? But then I'm watching some of the field events and I'm watching, sprints, and I'm watching steeplechase. And I'm like, You are seeing a little, and I don't know if I just am noticing it now because I've been thinking about it, but I don't feel like I always saw that much, like that many different bodies on the track before. And then I know, like, I'm not a sports person. So like, I know track, I sort of know like weightlifting, like, and there's also very
Mhm.
specific bodies for weightlifting. Right. So can you talk a little bit about, especially for kids, right? Because I know at a certain competitive level, like we are going to see, the marathon bodies, the Olympic weightlifting bodies, but um, talk about how we as parents or coaches or people who work with kids can like help them know that they can do the sports, even if they don't look like the typical person who plays football or person who does soccer. Like, what are some things that we can do? But then can you also talk a little bit about, I know I'm like asking you the longest question ever. Can you talk a little bit about, what is the science there on like why marathoners look the way that they do and how that makes them good? But then like, are there things that we can do if we don't look like that can still make us that good? Am I making this question too long?
No, I think you're okay.
Okay. And I will definitely re-ask it because I know I just like started to ramble. I got excited.
That's okay. Um, so as far as like our school level athletes, whether that's elementary, junior high, high school, I think junior high, high school, they start to notice it. But honestly, my oldest is 10, and he's starting to notice just because he's very thin and slender compared to his peers. Even though he's healthy and he's his normal, he notices that. So even at like a third to fourth grade level, they're starting to have that awareness socially of the people around them. And do I look exactly the same as others? And I think in the elementary ages, a lot of it is just a matter of reminding them, like, we're all good and we're all supposed to be a little bit different. We were all created different. There's never supposed to be a carbon copy of ourselves. And sometimes that in itself is enough at those early ages that it satisfies kind of that need. But at the older ages, the junior high, the high school, where they start getting very critical of themselves, becomes different. And I think at those levels, a lot of it is proving to them what they can do and how they are strong, and not looking at, like, I think we have to watch our language, especially women. A little bit men I see and observing, because I have all boys. So I'm starting to like observe, what are the things said to them? How do people talk? Like, because it's different when it's like a mom and a daughter versus just how people interact with the son and boys and stuff. There's a very clear like gender difference on how we speak to one another. With girls, so often it's noticing how thin someone looks or how a shirt fits or clothing and things like that. Instead of complimenting maybe clothing like you typically would, or like, oh, your shirt looks really good on you, or that dress is really pretty. You can also compliment and notice things like maybe they have bigger legs because they're a really strong, powerful runner. And instead point those things out and just be like, oh, hey, like those shorts really show like how strong your legs are. And it's just flipping a little bit of our language. Because I noticed it the most, I'll be honest, having all boys, and this is slightly off topic, but I'll go right back. But when girls are young, I noticed a million times over, whether it was at church or like different outings or church, like weddings and like events that girls are dressed up. Everything is all about, oh, I love your dress. Look at your dress. Oh, your hair's so pretty. Everything is that's so pretty. That's so pretty. And I think we condition them when they're young to always point that out, where the boys, the only comments are, hey, what are you doing lately? What'd you do over the weekend? Did you do anything fun? And like, the language difference is so prevalent in our culture. And I think it's just being aware and flipping how we talk. Now, I do notice as boys age, a lot of it's starting to transition, and there's a lot of talk over like, oh, well, are you strong or not? So like strength and big muscles seems to be like what is praised or noticed with boys. So On boys, maybe not as much point out like, oh, their shorts make your legs look strong. Cause to them, they're gonna be like, what? Like, you're weird. You know, but like, so with girls, like pointing out strength and whether it's just that or, hey, I noticed you did that today and you looked really strong when you were doing it. But pointing out strong and healthy, I think is key visually. And then I think with boys, a little bit of it's the power or noticing improvement. And same thing with all kids, just noticing the improvement there is different. You're going to see the different body styles at the elite levels though, because you're at like that upper where everyone weeds out. So on a science side of things, we have two primary types of like muscle fibers inside of our muscles. There's a slow twitch and then there's a fast twitch. Well, that also changes slightly how our muscles look and how our body looks. So like marathoners, your long distance, your endurance activities, they use a slow twitch muscle fiber the most. Like that's what gives us that stamina. But your power, like power lifters, weight lifters, your sprinters, that like quick explosive force and speed, that comes from our fast twitch fiber. So when you're looking at the top elite runners in the world or elite athletes of whatever sport it is, you're going to see a little bit of those differences, but you can even see that within the same position. Like if you pick one sport and you look at different positions, say a football team, or you look at a soccer team, some people are like running nonstop. And then some people are like, hey, I'm more like your skilled, quick agility, taking the shots, like that sort of position. So you naturally will find certain people are going to naturally be better at certain like positions in different sports. And it's kind of the same thing with running. You know, not everybody's going to be a running back because maybe they're a really fast person and they're more of a receiver. I mean, there's a lot of even college football players now that are also elite sprinters. And it's because the speed is so key for people. And I think being able to adapt what we do to fit our sport and to fit how we're coaching is key. So we adapt things based on what you're trying to improve. So same thing, if you're trying to improve running for somebody as far as like speed, you're going to work on hills and all that. Well, at the same time, those hills, you're building up all of the backside posterior chain muscles. You're building up their hamstrings, you're building up their glutes. Those are the muscles that are going to power them to give them that speed. So you're already doing it. You just might not realize on the science side that that's what's happening or that's why it works. But you just know that, hey, these certain training methods really help my athlete. So if you want someone to have, so I guess real quick, both types of muscle fibers are in every single person's body. The exact ratio is not a set number for anyone. It's just when you look at like who's like your elite sprinters, they're going to have a higher percentage that's fast twitch, where your marathoners are going to have a higher percentage that is your slow twitch. And that's simply just a difference of what their body percentage makeup is. But every single person is different. And I think that's just something too you can explain to junior high and high school runners too. If they're like, hey, I want to be faster, why am I not? Because speed is something I think we always chase as runners. Like it's always, you know, you hit a distance and then once you have like, hey, these are my races, it's speed is where you're improving. And that's like your kind of your marker of improvement. But if you want to improve your fast twitch muscle fibers and how they respond, strength training is your way to do that. So you're never going to change what percentage someone has in their body, but you can in fact change how responsive it is and how well they are able to get that muscle to work for them. And working on basically agility type of stuff or strength training are both going to really work that, and hills do as well. Hills are fabulous for that, for runners. And then same thing for your endurance people, it's just getting them out and keeping that intensity low. I think it's so hard for runners to slow ourselves down, but helping them to know, especially for the youth, even junior high and high school, of reminding them that sometimes to get that further distance you're chasing, you just have to bring your speed down a notch. And it doesn't mean you're doing worse or, that you're not good. It's very much on purpose, because this is just an added tidbit, but when you run with a training plan and you have your taper weeks, science actually shows us during our taper weeks that those fast twitch muscle fibers are actually getting stronger. So even though you're running less mileage, and as a runner, it's mentally hard sometimes to pull back and like embrace that taper and actually take it in, your muscle fibers are actually getting stronger during that time frame. And part of it is you're giving it a little more recovery time to build those muscle fibers stronger. But it's an incredible thing to think like, hey, less mileage is actually going to make me, better and stronger. But that's that. So really, I think so much of, just to wrap up kind of the long question and all of it, I think really what we tell them is based on just the small daily things. And then if we notice they're fretting about it, to pull them aside and let them know. And I know female runners are probably the most prone at that junior high, high school range when puberty is hitting, like things are switching. They're more prone to that like female athlete triad where, a lot of runners, if they're running too much, they'll start having missed periods and things like that. And those times as a parent, like that opens those windows to have a lot of these conversations. Because if your daughter as a runner is missing parts of her cycle because of what her running is, you can explain how that is and explain like the nutrition and the fueling and the importance of all of those components to her health. So that way you kind of embrace and make it all about being healthy and making the healthy choices, versus being just about a body image.
You were answering like as questions are popping into my head, you were answering them. So I was like, oh, this is going so well. And then I was just like, I have to quick type stuff because I started thinking of other things. So I'm like, there's so many things I want to get back to. But I mean, overall, I loved the like theme, I guess, of your answer of like, we need to be conscious of the way we're talking to kids, teenagers, anybody about their bodies, right? Like maybe we shouldn't even be saying anything about them, right? Because like, who knows how they're relating to their body, how they want to look. So I thought that was so great that you spoke on that, because I think that was really helpful. And also, I feel like you do a great job, and I'm sure people probably tell you this all the time that like come to see you for physical therapy, of like bringing the science in, but also making it so like us regular people can understand what you're talking about. Like I felt like at first I was like, oh, I'm going to be lost, but then I'm like, oh no, I'm right here with it. I got it. So that's super helpful. I want to talk about puberty, actually. That wasn't going to be any of my questions, but since you brought that up, because I think, I mean, like as a runner, I just am like constantly stalking running people, but like the whole Mary Kane issue, I don't know if you knew anything about Mary Kane, ran for Nike. She was a phenomenal youth athlete. She went to the Oregon Project and, kind of just fell off the face of the earth of running, basically. Not completely, but like, she just wasn't showing the promise that everyone thought she was going to. And, it turns out there was a lot of coaching errors. And I'm sure people who are into running can go into all that, but some of it also, reporters were talking about like puberty could have had a huge part in that, because, up until I think she went pro at like 17. So like she had late puberty and, she was just running with that prepubescent body. Right. And like when it changes it's so much to adjust to for some people. I don't remember ever having anything like that, but I also wasn't like an outstanding runner. So, but is there something like, is that just like an adjustment like we have to make? Is there something we can do to help those runners? Is there something they can be doing, or any athlete? Because I'm sure like lots of other sports, they can see that change. But I'm sure that's probably something that's pretty common, is people see that complete change in their performance because their body's not the body they used to know. Is like, do you ever work with that, or is there something that we can be doing to help them kind of overcome that adjustment?
Yeah, and I can speak to this on a personal level too, because same way I was late in all of mine. So I was like a 90 pounds freshman and sophomore of high school, like super bone thin. And all of a sudden, like everything hit, and it was like, oh, all of a sudden I gained like 20 pounds over a summer. And that's like very emotionally challenging. So I think one, being supportive, obviously. Two, a lot of it is just, hey, your body shifts, and understanding how even like the portions of your cycle for a female and when you're actually stronger. So there's a lot of research out that shows you're actually the strongest like right after your cycle ends and kind of in that beginning set. And that's just because you have higher like testosterone levels then, and the different hormone levels shifting. And I think a lot of that can play into helping, like if they feel so frustrated or feel like I'm not performing like I want to, you can help them understand and track even just on a calendar where their cycle is. Because especially in those early days, like no one has a 28-day exact science cycle for females. Like nobody does. That's like just an average. Sometimes it's 33, maybe it's 35, maybe, like it varies so much. But helping them understand and kind of charting that can help them be able to predict when things are going to happen. Because there's also shifts with the hormones that certain days leading up to that, you have like extreme fatigue. Well, what if your race falls on extreme fatigue day? Are you going to tear yourself apart because you just didn't have it in you as much to pull the same numbers that you were pulling a week ago? And it's nothing necessarily that they can control. There are certain things you can do to eat to like help yourself be more fueled and be more ready. Honestly, I've learned a lot of the hormone stuff. There's a book called Roar, ROAR, and it is by a sports, I think she's an exercise pathologist maybe, but she specializes in basically taking the science from women's running and women weightlifting and like sports stuff down to kind of the science level and the hormone level, and like what's happening at different stages when, and how we can optimize for performance. And I think that's a good resource if a parent has a daughter that really wants to dive into like the details of, I really want to understand this and know this. But I think my number one kind of word of wisdom to parents that have daughters in that phase is also to watch them, because so often that leads to either overrunning and overtraining or under eating. And if they're not nourished properly and they're trying to run the same miles, that's going to impact them, because they think, well, I need to be thinner because when I was thinner, I was performing at this level. But their performance wasn't tied to what the scale said. And I think helping them understand that conceptually and understand why their body is doing what it's doing really is key. So I think that's a good resource if you want to dive in heavy. Otherwise, just charting, giving the encouragement and support, and making sure that you're there for questions and that they get that. But I've also seen a lot of females dip into eating disorders at that phase, especially with running, or they go from, well, I was running like 15 miles a week and now I'm running like 30 to 40 miles a week because I think I have to do that to get my body back to how it was. And they're chasing that prior performance. So I think it's just being aware and monitoring so that you can help them like navigate those waters.
That was so helpful. Yeah. I will definitely look up that book, and I will try to link it in there. So if people are also looking for it, they can find it. Yeah, it's something I feel like I never really thought that much about with like tracking the cycles. And recently I was listening to a podcast where they were talking all about like there's certain parts where you're going to feel stronger. So like maybe really monopolize on that. And there's times you're going to feel weaker and you just need to be kind to yourself. So, I mean, it really just like reiterated everything you said. So that's really awesome and great advice on just like being supportive, because I think we just need to be supportive all the time. Right. before we run out of time, because I feel like I could just keep going and going and going, asking questions, I want to talk to you a little bit about being a parent of kids who play sports, because I am not a parent of anyone who plays sports yet. My son is one-ish, so not there
Mhm.
yet. Um, but especially because you have so much sports knowledge, like, does that impact, like, I mean, of course, you're like cheering for them and you want them to be amazing, but like, are there specific sports you're kind of like, oh, I'm a little worried about you doing that one? Or like, here are some things I know I can help to make sure you don't have common injuries, or like, anything really that, you as like an occupational hazard, but you're also a sports
Mhm.
parent, that kind of like all intersects. I know that wasn't even really a question, but I feel like you may know where I was kind of getting at.
Uh-huh. Yep. So with this one, just to give context, I'm a mom of three boys. They are 4, 7, almost turning 8 later this month, and 10. And what I do, honestly, and I laugh kind of as you're asking this because I've been just doing this like the last 2 to 3 weeks. So my oldest is about to start football tomorrow, actually. And he has the same coaches as last year. So I know their intensity, I know their expectations. And that's the good thing about them sticking with one sport, even if it's not the same coach, you have an idea of what is like that first month look like. And then you can help them by trying to help, because the coaches are all trying to condition them that first month, right? But you can help your child by, or your athlete, if you're a coach, either way, by helping them the weeks prior. So things that we do is, one, we just try to get their overall stamina for the day up. So that might look like, hey, we're not going to watch as many, like, you're not going to watch a movie in the middle of the day. We're going to keep going and we're going to make sure like we're a lot more active just to build up like the activity endurance for the day. Then I taper from kind of that, hey, let's just pick up what we're doing to make sure we're a lot more active almost every minute of the day. To then adding in, hey, we're going to start doing like some interval work. So for it, and this is sports specific. So if it's like a sport where they need to have a burst of energy of a sprinter, or like football, it's kind of like do something and then come back for a second and collect yourself for a minute or two and then do something. So for those that are in like that anaerobic stop and go type of format, you want to mimic that with what they're doing. So you can do that in the backyard playing, and it can be, hey, let's run some sprints, like I'll race you to the tree and back and stuff like that. Excuse me. It can be simple stuff, but at the same time, for like my 10-year-old, because he's a little bit on the older side, I had him hop on the treadmill and it was like, hey, we're going to do 2 minutes running, 1 minute walking, 2 minutes running, 1 minute walking. And we're going to start out just with like a mile. And then we're going to gradually work ourselves up, just so when he shows up at practice, they're trying to push them to get them in shape and get them conditioned. But if you give them that like 2-week head start to get them ready to tolerate that, that helps them not only be able to tolerate what the coach is doing, it helps to prevent like overuse injuries, because they're building up that load. And so much of what I do with physical therapy, so many injuries are overuse or overtraining injuries, especially with runners. It's adapting our tendons to what we want them to do. So if you're either all of a sudden you've done nothing all summer and you show up and you're going to go run high mileage, well, usually in that 10-day to 21-day window, you're going to start to see injuries pop up. And that's because your body wasn't adapted and ready for it. But if you slowly, incrementally increase that, it'll help. And then for the things for people with like running or soccer, or your more aerobic type of long endurance, long stamina stuff, same thing. It's just build that up. It's like, hey, let's just go for a jog around the neighborhood, or let's go, do something, or play that specific sport in the backyard, just enough to get like their lungs kind of in shape and conditioned so that it's not so hard for them. Because we do lose that. You lose a lot of your training capacity within 2 weeks of stopping a sport. So unless they've been actively working at that, you can help. And that decreases your risk of injury. Another thing for fall sports specifically, especially cross country running, track, it's not an issue, but cross country it is. If it is like not rained a lot, this sounds crazy, but if it hasn't rained a lot in your area, the ground is really hard. And when the ground is really hard and you're running on it, whether it's soccer, cross country, whatever your sport is, that's a lot harder in your body because you can't absorb the forces quite the same. Excuse me. So then you start to see shin splints pop up for people. And that's usually when the ground is just super hard. All of a sudden, it's like, why is everyone getting shin splints? And it's typically that impact issue for people. So if you notice that, if you treat it early and stop it early, that's your best bet. If they want to push and train through it, especially those high school age range where it's like, I just want to keep pushing, just want to keep pushing. That's when they're risking a stress injury that's going to sideline them longer, where if they reach out and get help and get guidance or know what to do, they can prevent that and kind of pull themselves back for a week or two and then be fine and still have their season. So those are kind of the things as a parent, if something's popping up in that first 2 to 3 week window, it's like, hey, it's usually an intensity level. And if you can decrease intensity, decrease the volume, they're going to be able to last through their season most likely. And same for coaches. If you notice all of a sudden lots of people are getting that type of stuff pop up, is reevaluate what you're doing and see if you need to pull back your intensity level to let their bodies adapt and recover.
That's so interesting. And like, it seems really obvious because as you're saying, like, oh, my son, we start, doing more activity and then we're actually mimicking kind of what his practice is going to look like. All I'm thinking is like, oh yeah, I'm sure it can be really hard for kids to adjust from like what summer looks like to sports in school. But I'm like, no, you're talking, well, yes, that part, but also like, I'm getting his body ready because I don't think we all always think of like injuries and kids in sports just from like not doing something. I think more often, and maybe I'm just making an assumption, we're picturing like impact injuries, like, collisions or rolled ankles, or, we're not always thinking of just like their bodies weren't doing that. And then we just thrust them into it because like they can do it. I'm like making air quotes here. They can, because, kids have that like weird limitless energy to like run around and play, but like they aren't really ready. Their lungs aren't ready. Their muscles aren't ready. Their tendons aren't, so that was definitely a great perspective on that. I feel like we have gone on a little long, even though I definitely have more questions, but do you have any like last things that I didn't get to that you want to say? And then like, how can people find you for questions or anything like that?
Yeah, so I don't think I have anything else to say other than just, be the biggest encourager for your athlete, whether that's you as a coach, you as a parent, you as a parent who coaches, whatever that dynamic is. I think letting them know that it's okay to not always be 100%, like none of us are. And just being that constant encourager. But I've really enjoyed being here and talking and sharing everything. And I love running. I didn't as a younger person, but I found that love for it. And I found that strength. And I think sharing that with others is so key, so that they can recognize that within themselves. If anyone has questions, my typical home, business-wise, is healthy.mom. And I work mostly with the mom population, but I'll be honest, a lot of times I'm fielding questions, whether it's from my son's friends, parents, on sports stuff, or also a lot of moms I work with, they'll reach out and say, hey, my daughter's got this going on. Can I get some help? Can I get some opinions? So a lot of what you'll find at healthy.mom is more mom geared, but a lot of my philosophy is if moms are strong, then we can make our family strong, and then we end up creating strong communities. So I think so much of it starts with us, and being that role model and that encourager and trying to help facilitate just that healthy life for them, sets them up to be healthy and strong themselves. So that's kind of where you can find me if you look for anything else, but I've really enjoyed being here.
I will definitely link that in the show notes so people can find you more easily. And Thank you so much. This has been so fun. And I love that you shared your little running story because it's always interesting to hear everybody's like, I wasn't a runner. I'm now a runner. I've always been a runner, and it's so nice to like
Mhm.
everyone, there's going to be something that's relatable to everybody. So that is great. And thank you for all of the knowledge that you dropped on us today. This has been so much fun. And thank you for all of your time. This has been really great.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
I just want to thank Shari so much for all of her time and her information. It was all really helpful, really informative. I feel like my brain must have grown. I haven't learned some science stuff in a long time, so that was really fun. You can find her at her website. It has all of her info to find her on her socials as well. So the link for that will be in the show notes. Thank you for tuning into Raising Runners. New episodes every Tuesday, and we are always looking to talk to people about running, mental health, or anything along the spectrum that can help our young athletes, or just talking to runners or parents and coaches of our young runners as well. Hopefully you find our resources helpful. If you have questions, comments, or anything else, feel free to email me at marikeyrunclub@gmail.com.